Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to another edition of Carnivore Radio. I'm your host, SHerman, along with the esteemed Dr. Eric Lopkin. Dr. Lopkin, sometimes it does happen that some guests fell through the cracks, but I think maybe after talking before the show, maybe it's an opportunity because I think the subject is disturbing that we're going to broach and relevant, and that is, you know, it's interesting because I'm kind of a history buff at heart, and the subject is the decline of America. And we talked before the show, you look at the 50s, right after World War II, it's like 75% of everything made in the world came from America. A lot of it was by default because the rest of the world was pummeled. And then I think the beginning of our decline was the Vietnam War, not just militarily, but socially and economically. Johnson, even though the intelligentsia rates him as, I have no idea how this happens, in the top like 15 presidents, I believe he's in the bottom 15. And in fact, even economically, having guns and butter, he did both, a great society and a huge expansion into the war. But anyway, I think Vietnam was the beginning of our decline. Then we got a reprieve with Reagan, and I'll even go to George H.W. Bush and Clinton. Those were some great years. I mean, under President Clinton, you know, I think we're pretty fair and balanced. If you wanted a job, I know this, you got a job. The economy, we were on top of the world with Clinton. I mean, you know, I'm saying, you know, he had his moral issues, but America was humming. And then after 9/11, I think the 21st century has not been kind to America. And I think Trump has to take some responsibility as well. But now we're at a point where, and you mentioned it before the show, if you're one of our adversaries like Putin or Kim Jong-un or anyone, you got to be shaking your head saying they imploded themselves. Like, we didn't have to fire a shot. You got a senile president. Like, if it was a movie 20, 30 years ago, we'd walk out and say, this is ridiculous. But it's reality, isn't it, Dr. Lopkin?
It really is. And, you know, part of the problem is, well, actually a part of the problem is partisanship. You mentioned how things were great under Reagan, H.W. Bush, and Clinton. And by today's standards, all three of those presidents were incredibly centrist. Ronald Reagan worked with Tip O'Neill. Bill Clinton worked with Newt Gingrich. They crossed the party lines. They worked together. And I think that stopped. Honestly, in 2001, that stopped because the Democrats started throwing a temper tantrum over Gore's loss.
True.
And then there was
well done. I did not, you know something, I wouldn't have cited that. But Dr. Lopkin, you nailed it. That's exactly when it happened. They were throwing eggs at George W. Bush, and I think it never got back to normal after that.
No, I mean, we had some semblance of bipartisanship when dealing with 9/11, but even that didn't last all that long. I mean, we got the Patriot Act, which this just shows the downside of bipartisanship because, you know, this was Lewis Black has a line, and I'm going to butcher it because I don't remember it exactly, but basically it's, you know, the problem is when Republicans and Democrats work together is that Republicans say, I have a bad idea, and the Democrats say, and I can make it worse.
That's pretty much it. I think actually talking about the decline of America, and I think bin Laden said that, it'll cost me $100,000 to pull off 9/11. and it can bankrupt the United States. I mean, we fall. I mean, and Trump was right about this. We're not led by the best and the brightest. It started with Vietnam, who really actually were the best and the brightest, like McNamara, the whole Kennedy. I mean, all Harvard grads. Well, they bought into the domino theory and you name it, and had a war. You know, listen to this, Dr. Lopkin, because I'm teaching Vietnam right now, and I find it fascinating. You're the president of the United States. Johnson, I don't consider the brightest bulb in the Christmas tree. And you say, what is the strategy for victory in Vietnam? And Westmoreland tells you, we're going to kill more of them than they're going to kill. I mean, that's a strategy? I mean, so.
No, we had no strategy.
Go ahead. None. And all those young boys died, 58,000. How many lives were ruined that didn't get killed? How many Vietnamese, millions were killed? And the economy shattered. That's what set up the 70s as stagflation. Just unbelievable. But now, look at, some of the gains. Trump had his emotional issues. We'll just leave it at that. But, it's just amazing. And you have a president, please count, that does not have control of all his faculties. I don't think he's behind. I don't think Joe Biden of 20 years ago is anything like what's going on now.
No, he isn't. 20 years ago, whether you agreed with Biden's policies or not, he could make a coherent argument for them. He was running things by facts. Now his mind is gone. They're keeping him away from the media. He's not talking to the Republicans at all because, quite frankly, the Republicans will not cover his ass, about his dementia. So they're trying to keep him separate. He hasn't really answered questions. He has people that go answer his questions for him. And if Trump had tried to pull any of this, the media would have been outraged. So now what we've got...
at the expense... I'm sorry, go ahead.
Now what we've got is we've got two parties that do not talk, that do not compromise. We do not have a fourth estate, which is responsible for keeping them in check. And now the Democrats are trying to destroy the Supreme Court.
Yeah, it's completely unbelievable. And part of the problem is gerrymandering the districts because there's no, if you had an actual fair distribution, like you have Larson in Connecticut. Please help me. Has he actually even done anything in 30 years?
Well, none of the Connecticut constituents in either the Senate or the House have done anything, but they keep getting reelected because the districts have been gerrymandered to minimize Republican and independent votes.
Yeah, and that's across the nation. That's just in Connecticut. It's for the Republicans. So my point is, because it's so biased, you're not rewarded for being an arbitrator, a mediator. You're rewarded for being as radical, as far to a degree as your party wants, and that's basically what we have here. No one talks to each other. There's no incentive to do that. It's really, I have to be honest with you. I'll ask you the question: how much better off are we than a banana republic? You look at a banana republic. They don't have the resources that America has. I mean, we did it to ourselves. A banana republic was behind the eight ball. We were never behind the eight ball, and we're putting the eight ball behind us. Self-inflicted wounds.
Our warned everybody about the military-industrial complex, and the fact of the matter is, it wasn't the military and it wasn't in the private sector that we needed to worry about. It was the people we were electing. Because we're not electing the best and the brightest, because the best and the brightest didn't want to go into politics. And to be fair, take a look historically. We never had the best and the brightest. Going back to the 19th, the 18th century, it was wealthy families that put their kids in politics because that was where the power was. We've never had the best and the brightest, but we've always whitewashed it.
Now it's worse because back then I would still say there were some people that had a gleam of accomplishment going into politics. Fast forward 50, 60, 80 years later, I mean, you might not like their policy, like Woodrow Wilson. I mean, a lot of things I didn't like about it. I mean, he was no dummy. He was president of Princeton University. Ronald Reagan. Yeah, okay. People say he wasn't what? He was an accomplished person. Nancy Pelosi, really?
Well, but that's
Joe Biden.
The problem. Back in 19th, 18th century, when people went into politics, they had to do something first, either military service or they had to have a successful private practice or, again, you said head of Princeton University. Now, politics has become a family business for many families. Is the goal not something that, we've long since passed the point where public service is any kind of honorable career. And we have people who
like
are absolutely incompetent. Rosa DeLauro got her position because it belongs to her father did it before her.
Yeah, and has she ever done anything? Does she even understand Middletown, Connecticut? No.
No.
Larson was a teacher, and something he was probably worth, $50,000 net worth. I'm sure if you looked at his balance sheet right now, he's probably worth a couple million. Hello, Banana Republic.
Yeah, everything that the politicians are doing, and this is both sides. Whenever one side gets control, they're the ones doing this. So we're talking about the Democrats right now, but the same thing applies to the Republicans. They are out for their careers and their power. They don't care about the American people. The Democrats certainly don't care about the American people because they've got
but wait a second. I appreciate great marketing, and I'm sorry, the Democrats are the best marketers ever. How do you work directly against the best interests of middle America, but still sell it to them that you're lunch pail Joe? Brilliant. You might not be able to govern anything, but man, that's great marketing.
It is brilliant marketing, but I don't know that so much that they're brilliant marketers as it is that they got the media on their side. They've got basically the news media in America is the marketing department for the Democratic Party. I mean, I've watched newscasts where Democrats come out and blatantly lie. And they're never questioned about it. They're not challenged about it. But if a Republican says something even slightly incorrect, they're all over it.
No, it's really, even with this latest round with Hunter Biden, I like her, Moriarty, her name is. I'm not sure about her name. But she does 48 Hours, murder mysteries. So she interviewed him on CBS Good Morning, whatever. I just saw the excerpt. And he's like, I don't know if it's my laptop. And she moved on to the next question. I was saying, what do you mean you don't know if it – and even if it's not, are those your pictures or not? Who cares if it's your laptop? It's yours, dude.
Right. I mean, Hunter Biden is the perfect example because right now Hunter Biden is being investigated for owning an illegal firearm because he lied on a gun application to get the weapon. And the media is not covering this. Meanwhile, his father is yelling about gun control.
No, it's totally. And the last thing before we break is, I'm really not enamored with the Ivy League like I used to be when I was a kid. Hunter Biden went to Yale Law School. Are you friggin' kidding me? I mean, he is absolutely no genius. I'm sorry. This is a fact.
There is absolutely nothing to be enamored over what higher education has become in this country. I worked briefly for Wesleyan University. I was what they called me was a teaching artist. And this was, I was teaching writing, but I was not a professor. I was an actual writer who taught how to write. And I was privy to one of the conversations where they were talking about the salaries of those of us who were teaching what we actually did for a living. And they actually said, well, we can't give them too much of a raise because then they'll be making just as much as real professors. So they're putting more value on people who have never been involved with what they're teaching, but they studied it, rather than people who are actually involved. And that's where higher education has become a failure.
Hold that thought while we take a break. I think that's amazing. We'll continue that after.
We'll be right back.
To reach the next level, you need to operate at peak performance. The key to this is mastering the 7 elements of success. Learn how to master mindset, focus, operations, communications, innovation, evaluation metrics, and continuous improvement. Get the Biznetics way at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, and bookstores near you.
And we're back. And remember, if you want to be part of the conversation, you can call us at 563-999-3693. That's 563-999-3693.
Well, you had an interesting point when we went to break. I find it fascinating. It's kind of an aside. But you talk about people never doing anything. You know, I teach business as an adjunct on, the collegiate level. Even before I ever got into teaching, or when I was actually going for my MBA, I found it amazing. Like, you have a professor, especially in business, because my theory, as convoluted as it is, a cell is a cell inside the classroom or outside the classroom. Meaning, if you teach biology, you don't necessarily have to have been a biologist for Pfizer. I mean, it's kind of what it is, what it is. But if you're teaching like business or writing and you've never done it, like, and I see these business professors that have actually never been in business, it's all theoretical. It has nothing to do with like reality. Like, it's good to be intelligent. I get that. But if you've never worked in business and you're teaching business, I mean, you have really no basis in reality, Dr. Lopkin.
No, they really don't. There's an old saying, in theory and practice are the same. In practice, they aren't. And that's what the academia fail to understand, is that just because they studied it in a book does not mean that's how it works in the real world. And I'm reminded of a Rodney Dangerfield movie, Back to School, where he is a successful businessman and he decides to go back to school to spend time with his son, and he's in a business class, and the business professor puts out the curriculum and what they're going to be studying, and Rodney Dangerfield just goes, "Oh, you left out a whole lot of things," and he goes into how the real world works.
Oh, yeah, no, it's funny. But, well, actually, with higher education now, I think half of it is social justice. It's not even about an education. I mean, you go to most schools, and when I was a student, you'd walk down the hall, and it'd be, go to Italy, learn, go for your MBA, whatever the thing, join the Chi Omega fraternity, whatever. Now you would be shocked, Dr. Lopkin, walking down the halls where I teach, and it's everything, every leaflet, every poster is about victimization. Like, everyone's a victim. Like, join the, any cause you could. I didn't even know they had such a cause. Everyone's a victim. It's unbelievable. Your comment.
Yeah, and that's a common problem, not just on college campuses. Americans have become victims. It's not my fault that I'm not making enough money. It's not my fault that this happened. I'm a victim. And you know what? It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you see yourself as a victim, you're never going to be anything but a victim.
Okay, but aren't we training victims? I mean, it's really it's dumbfounding. I mean, like I said, you walk down the hall. It used to be go to Europe for the summer, or, I don't know, learn Spanish, whatever it was. Every poster is about social justice or being a victim. I think it's about half the focus on instead of a university focusing how are we going to be better academically, it's like, how are you going to be woke? Who's going to be more woke?
Yeah, that's their big focus right now. And this is actually not something that's happening recently. This is the result of decades of problems in the educational system, and not just higher education. The problem starts with K through 12, because we stopped teaching people how to think. It was about memorization, learn the facts, follow rules, and we stopped teaching people how to think. And the people who are successful now, take a look at their academic careers. Generally, either A, they dropped out of higher education and went on their own, or B, from a young age, they went outside the educational system to learn things. I mean, I remember my friends and I going back to elementary school. Every Friday afternoon after school, we went to the library. We learned stuff that wasn't being taught in school. People don't do that anymore.
I actually did the same thing. Even when I was out of college, not because anyone told me to, I enjoyed it, as weird as it sounds.
Yes.
And I also think the internet did not help, because let's say when we were in college, I'm just making you that write a report, was George Washington a good general? Okay, you'd actually have to read some books, some articles, and formulate your own opinion. Now you just Google it. Yeah, you can wordsmith it so it doesn't sound like you ripped it off, but no one's making their own decision. Who knows? I mean, no one really comes to their own conclusion. After reading several books and numerous articles, I've come to the conclusion that in spite of what people think, George Washington was a horrible general or a good general. It doesn't make it, but there is no one for it, so no one really thinks.
It's more than that, though, because this is partially because of government policy. State, local governments, federal government, they've all looked at a funding policy that the better the students do on tests, the more money that school gets. So they're not. The answer for the schools wasn't teach better, it was lower the standards. So when we were in school, you went to a library, you had to have at least 3 independent sources that you were quoting from. Now you Google it, you're not required to get different sources. You can use anything as a source, because God knows the internet is full of bad information. Mm-hmm. So you're not. Yeah,
here's an interesting point.
I think encouraged to look at facts and learn.
No, what do you think of this? And I've seen this because I've read many articles about schools are now, especially some private schools, could be in trouble, whatever. I think. Now you tell me this. You have a young son. Yep. I actually think that you could shoot colleges can shoot themselves in the foot, because if something, I don't care how much you can dress it up, if it becomes nonsensical, it doesn't have the attraction. Like, for the last 50 years, colleges have had basically a monopoly, because you had to pay to play. I mean, if you don't have a college degree, you're going nowhere, dude. I think that's starting to ebb. I think people that go to alternative ways of education, I'm not so sure you're not going to. What the world doesn't need is another marketing director, correct?
No, things are changing. Tech companies, Apple, Google, have both announced that they do not require college degrees anymore for employment. My son had great grades in high school. He could have gotten into any college he wanted. He looked at these colleges and went, you know what? I don't want to graduate with a mountain of debt. I don't want to deal with all of this political stuff. He went to a community college, got professional certifications, and now he can be hired in his field by any company.
I think that's brilliant, because if you look at things
and it didn't cost him a dime.
You get real skills that also no one can take away from you. I'm sorry, if you get a degree in management, whatever, your boss doesn't like you because your tie sucks, you're fired, and then good luck getting another job after that one, right? If you get a certificate, a degree in become an X-ray technician, that's a great living that you probably have lifetime employment in.
Yes, but even
and it
more
costs
than
you
that,
$20,000.
If that. Here's the thing.
If that.
The Democrats have been yelling that we need to make community colleges free. Well, you know what? If you pay attention in school, if you get good grades, community colleges are already free. My son was able to get enough scholarships and grants that they paid him to go to school. And all you have to do is pay attention.
And, yeah, I agree with you, but I don't think it's like the Democrats. I think they do a lot of things to sound humanitarian, but I think it's just a way to grab control of the community college system by having it's a government program.
Well,
and I also think
it's not even a matter of trying to grab the community college system. I think it's much more simpler than that. They're trying to buy votes. They're trying to, we gave you free college, so now you should vote for us.
I'd agree. Everything they do is calculating. I agree with this. Let me ask you a marketing question, because here's what I think. I think there's huge opportunities for universities, not all, the ones that can spot trends, see what's going on, to transform. I think colleges that get rid of the woke stuff, get more real in terms of instead of having, lesbian studies, actually have something that is, that's grounded in getting a job, okay, whatever that is. I think there's because I think a lot of people, the silent majority, whatever you want to call it, don't want to send their kids to freak OU. They want to kind of, get a more grounded situation.
Colleges for a long time were positioning themselves that they weren't about preparing you for life. They were about helping you to figure out who you are and how to find yourself. Well, guess what? Nobody ever found themselves in college. They found themselves 10 years after they were in a career when they really started to understand who they are.
No question.
They need to stop this find yourself. And again, this is not just college. This goes back to Sesame Street. Because when Sesame Street debuted in 1969, they were about teaching reading, teaching writing, teaching math, teaching grammar. Now it's all about teaching tolerance and teaching acceptance. Well, you know what? Tolerance and acceptance are not going to get you a job.
Well, that's my final question before we have to go. Aren't we setting up a generation of losers? If you're the victim, eventually the victimization has to run out. You can't run home to mommy at 35 years old. I'm a victim. My boss didn't like me. Well, maybe he didn't do anything. Well, anyway, my boss didn't like me. I'm a victim. He didn't like me because I was red, blue, green, whatever. That shtick doesn't last forever, does it?
This is the millennial generation. This was the generation that got awards showing up, that were overprotected, and now we're all suffering the fate of this. When you look at Gen Z, talk to Gen Z, they have turned around. They don't believe in this woke garbage. They don't believe in being protected. They want to go out. They don't want to go to college, other than possibly community college, to get some skills. So we are really turning it around. And on that note, we are just about out of time. So we will be back here next Friday at blogtalkradio.com/Carnivore Radio. And you can listen to the replay of Carnivore Radio, as well as the Carnivore Bites podcast at xvadio.com/podcast, as well as the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, and wherever you find podcasts. We'll see you next week.